Hey everyone, Chris Kavanaugh here. I'm joined by Jacob Tarango, and we're going to talk today about product rotation. So for starters, why don't we address the question, why do we rotate products to begin with? So here's the official district answer to that question. It says that the Coachella Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District practices product rotation and examines pesticide resistance. When an insect population is exposed to the same active ingredient, there exists a high risk of the population becoming less susceptible to the pesticide. Using products with different active ingredients reduces the risk of developing resistance. So we could see from that we tend to focus a lot on this concept of resistance and avoiding it. But a lot of people may not actually understand how resistance occurs in the first place. So I wanted to put up this little infographic to kind of illustrate what we're talking about when we mention pesticide resistance. So what we can see here is that we have a population of insects. That's the ones at the top. And you can see that they have chromosomes, which is parts of their DNA, with alleles, the colored parts, which is a version of a certain gene on that chromosome. And you've got the green ones, which are sort of the normal ones, but then you have these two that have a red allele, and that corresponds to a version of the gene that confers pesticide resistance. So when you have a pesticide application, the pesticide is going to work on all the insects that have the normal gene, but it's not going to work against the ones that have the red, that mutated version of the gene. So you can see that those live on, they survive to the next generation. And because there's only ones with the red genes, they end up mating with each other, and then they pass that gene on to future generations. And so you can see that if we continue to do more applications with that same product, we're just going to be repeating that issue. So when it comes to trying to avoid a situation like that from occurring, we need to make sure that we're using different types of pesticides that have different active ingredients. So here at the district, we essentially have three main larval control product types based on their active ingredient. So we have our microbials, which includes our BTI and our Bacillus sphaericus products. Those are going to be your Vectovac, Vectolex, Vectomax, those sorts of things. And those are gut toxins. So those are digested by the mosquito larvae, and then the pesticide attacks their midgut and results in mortality that way. And then we have our methoprene products, and also I think pyriproxyfen, one of our newer ones. So those are going to be our Alticid products, or in the case of pyriproxyfen, Nigard. And these are insect growth regulators. So those work by exposing the larvae to juvenile hormone, which prevents them from being able to molt into pupae, or they become pupae, but then they eventually can't make it all the way to adulthood. So finally, we have our spinosad products. Those are going to be your Natular products, and those work as neurotoxins. So they interfere with nerve and muscle function. So you can see with the different types of mosquito products that we have, the mode of action is very different between all three. So the likelihood of mosquito larvae having resistance to all these different modes of action is very, very small. They may have this mutated allele or version of a gene that gives them some resistance to microbials, for example, but then they're not going to have resistance also to a spinosad product. So that's why it's important that we're constantly rotating between these three products, and then that can avoid that situation that we saw in the earlier slide of the resistant gene being passed down from generation to generation. So managing resistance and rotating between these different products, it kind of sounds simple, but we got to remember that there's a lot of factors to consider when performing a treatment that you guys are aware of. So when you're out there, you're thinking about the water source, the location, whether it's an organic or non-organic property, what type of life stages of the mosquito larvae are you seeing, what time of year is it, what about the water temperature, vegetation density, is there a lot of inflow or outflow of water taking place, what about the site history, and finally, last product used, and there may be even a few more variables here that I'm missing. So you can see it's a lot of things that go into the decision-making process when you're performing a control application. So where exactly does product rotation fit into all this? Well, thankfully, we've come up with some guidelines that'll hopefully help take some of the guesswork out of this equation. And so these guidelines are broken down by habitat type. So I'm going to go ahead and start things off with agricultural areas, and then I'm going to hand it off to Jacob, who's going to talk about these guidelines for some other habitat types that you may encounter. So for agriculture, the number one thing you want to do is check if the property is organic. And you can see this in the mobile or in your new tablet application. But it's also a good idea to verify with the property manager or whoever's there working on site. Hopefully you have some sort of relationship with the workers there, because it's really important to know that information, whether or not the property is organic. And it's going to have a big influence on the type of products that we can use there. So if it's non-organic, then all active ingredients can be used, and rotation should occur with each application. The one caveat to that is that methoprene can be used twice in a row. Now, for the months of March to November, when it's typically a lot warmer out here, the focus should be on rotation between microbial and methoprene products. And the reason for that is because, as we know, microbial products are a lot more effective in the warmer months because they rely primarily on the larvae actually feeding on the products, which the larvae are feeding a lot more actively when it's warmer outside. So conversely, between December and February, in the colder parts of the year, the focus on rotation is between spinosad and methoprene products. So we want to try to stay away from our microbials when it's colder, for the same reason that when it's cold, the larvae are feeding a lot less, making the microbial products less effective. So if the field is organic, then only Vectobac WDG and Natural products may be used. However, all other active ingredients, or all active ingredients, so including methoprene, should be used in the surrounding properties, just to get some general rotation in that area. And then the one important thing to keep in mind, particularly in these organic locations, because you're going to be doing so many Natural applications, is to pay attention to the annual limits for Natural applications. And those can be found on the product label. So there's a certain limit to how many Natural treatments you can do in an area in 1 year. So got to make sure you're reading the label and you're aware of that. So that's pretty much it for your agricultural sites. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and hand things off to Jacob, and he's going to talk about some of the other habitat guidelines.
Hi everybody, my name is Jacob, and I will be completing the second half of this presentation. Duck clubs. To begin, duck clubs can be treated with an alternating cycle of microbials and methoprene. Microbials are best used if the water temperature is 60 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. Like Chris mentioned earlier, if the water temperature is warmer, the larvae are more likely to be active, which means that they'll most likely be eating. If the water temperature is below 60 degrees Fahrenheit, spinosad products such as Natural will be used. For every spinosad or microbial product application, 2 methoprene products can be used afterwards. The operation manager will set the rotation list of which duck clubs will receive which active ingredients. Technicians should use the same active ingredient for spot treatments within a site that had a large scale or aerial application for the life of the product of the large-scale application, depending on larval development or presence of pupae. For example, a site where Natural G30 was applied could receive treatments of Natural R2EC if late instars are present and it has been less than 30 days since the initial application of Natural G30. Marshes near the Salton Sea. The marshes of the Salton Sea follow a similar protocol to that of the duck clubs. Microbials are to be rotated with methoprene from March to November if the temperature of the water is above 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Spinosad and methoprene will be rotated when the water temperature is below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Once again, for every microbial or spinosad treatment, 2 extended release methoprene products can be used back to back afterwards. Aerial applications will follow the same alternating treatment pattern. Like the duck clubs, a technician is recommended to use the same active ingredient for spot treatments within a site that had a large scale or aerial treatment, while being mindful of the larval developmental stages present. Lastly, it would be wise to align treatments in the marshes with the treatment schedule of nearby duck clubs. For example, if a duck club is being treated with a spinosad product, a neighboring marsh should be treated with methoprene. If the technician feels they need to deviate from the rotation, the technician will discuss the situation with their field supervisor. Underground storm water structures. Underground storm water structure treatments will be made based on the following factors: larvae abundance, larvae developmental stages present, and water intake or outtake. Water that sits consistently and does not change much would warrant a long-term application. However, if the water evaporates quickly or is not consistently present, the situation would likely require a short-term application. Products should be rotated based on the previous treatments, with microbials being used from March to December. The district has found that the temperature of the water in drains is warmer in December than it is in open ponds and marshes. If a technician dips and sees early instars, they can use Vectobac 12AS for a short-term application. If the technician encounters fourth instars or pupae, control oil or Agni-Q can be used for a short-term application. In both cases, Alticid XR briquettes or Natural R XRT can be used for long-term applications. Open storm water structures. Open storm water structures include habitats like ditches and gutters. Similarly to underground storm water structures, applications are based on previous products used, with microbials being used from March to November, like previously stated. Liquid products such as Vectobac 12AS and ALL are recommended in these settings. These habitats are usually in public view, and briquettes may stand out and could easily be picked up by a child or a dog. It is up to the technician to decide if the situation requires briquettes or not. Overall, there are plenty of things that come into play when deciding to do an application. It is not as simple as throwing a briquette into a water source and hoping that it miraculously kills everything. We rotate our products to slow down pesticide resistance in our local mosquito populations. Remember that there is a variety of factors that help a technician make the right decision, whether it be water temperature, larvae development, vegetation density, or some combination of everything else. It is also important to understand how our products work so that we can continue to treat efficiently, effectively, and timely. Thank you for your time. This concludes our presentation. Now we can move into questions if there are any.